It was one of the defining moments of the civil rights movement, just 2.5 weeks after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his I Have a Dream speech. The 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham was bombed, injuring 22 and killing 4 little girls. 50 years later, we're just beginning to learn about a 5th girl who made it out alive. WGBH News reporter Clennon King sat down with Sarah Collins Rudolph this morning to find out what brings her to Boston.
I remember I was in the lounge.
Sarah Collins Rudolph remembers the sound and the fury of the sticks of dynamite that exploded around her September 15th, 1963.
And I heard a loud sound, it was boom, and I just didn't know what it was.
Rudolph, her 14-year-old sister Addie Mae Collins, and 3 other girls had just finished Sunday school when terror struck at the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham.
When it went off, I called Addie, but she didn't answer.
When the smoke cleared, not only did Sarah lose her sight in one eye and her sister, but also her friends Cynthia Wesley, Carol Robertson, and Denise McNair.
I just wonder why would they kill Addie? You know, Addie never did do anything. You know, I just couldn't understand that.
It's part of what earned her hometown the nickname Birmingham, where segregationists use water hoses on children and police sick dogs on demonstrators. After the funerals and public outrage, the Kennedy White House responded, introducing a civil rights bill, one Rudolph says was long overdue.
We needed our civil rights. And, you know, when you live in Birmingham, Alabama, you don't want to be treated like they treated us.
Eventually, trials were held, and convictions were handed down in the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing.
Good afternoon.
Rudolph now shares her story of what happened that Sunday, including at places like Roxbury Community College. She has a message for Boston, which faced a year ago, which she's been healing from for 5 decades.
I forgive them for what they did because, you know, it wouldn't bring my sister and my friends back, and it wouldn't bring my sight back by hating. So I feel that we just got to love each other in spite of what people do to us.
Now, of the 4 men who were actually responsible for it, Emily, 1 was never charged, 2 actually died behind bars, and a 3rd remains there.
Well, that's a great attitude that Ms. Randolph has, too.
Absolutely.
Thanks for that, Clennon. All right, well, most of us watch the civil rights movement unfold on grainy black and white televisions, but my next guests saw it play out in living color. Sandy Jaffe is a documentary filmmaker who also grew up in Birmingham. She now lives in Watertown. Diane McWhirter was born in Birmingham and wrote a Pulitzer Prize-winning history of her hometown. She now lives in Cambridge. Welcome to both of you. So, Diane, you were about the same age as the kids who were killed. What do you remember from the time when you were there?
I don't remember hearing about the church bombing.
Really?
Even though President Kennedy was assassinated 2 months later, and I have totally vivid recall of that. So when I said that to a friend of mine I grew up with, Sandy and I grew up together, she said, that's why you had to write this book and I didn't.
It was we all, I mean, I certainly heard about it. It was big news up in the Northeast anyway.
Yeah. I mean, of course, I felt like it was always in my consciousness somehow, but I don't remember the moment. Sandy does.
How about you, Sandy? Do you?
Sandy was downtown.
I don't exactly remember the moment, but I do remember knowing about it because I grew up in a Jewish family, and our temple had, there was a thwarted bombing of it, 52 sticks of dynamite, 5 years earlier. So even though I was very, very young, we heard about stuff like that. And my father also did a lot of trade with black customers, and it was just impossible not to hear about what was going on.
Wow. So, Diane, when you were writing your book, you had to come to terms with a lot of stuff, including the fact that there had been some KKK in past history in your family. What did you discover, though, about the motivations? What would drive somebody to have that kind of hatred? I mean, they could see that it was children they were dealing with that day.
What I discovered was that the bombers, the most shocking discovery I made was that the bombers, the men who bombed the church, had been in earlier years protected by City Hall, by the commissioner for 22 years, which many of your viewers may still remember Bull Connor. He was sort of the cartoon villain of the era. He had Robert Chambliss, Dynamite Bob Chambliss, who was the sort of ringleader of the bombing, had been his snitch inside the Ku Klux Klan for years. And so it's in the life cycle of the vigilante. What happens is that they do the bidding of the establishment for as long as they're given their orders. But when things change and they want them to stop doing that, they can't call back what they've unleashed. So that's what happened in the case of the bombing. That was not approved by any means officially. But these Klansmen had been given impunity for years.
Wow. So, Sandy, just by coincidence, you live across the street from the boat yard where Jahar Tsarnaev was.
About 5 houses down.
Not the boat yard, but where the boat was.
Yep, around the corner.
What did you think of Ms. Rudolph's acknowledgement to the bombing and comparing it that way back then to this, and saying, really you can't change anything, you can't bring people back, but it's just a matter about moving on and loving and embracing. I mean, are there similarities?
Well, I guess terrorism is terrorism. Yeah. At the time when the 16th Street Church bombing occurred, people didn't call it terrorism.
No.
But I think now they would.
Some people thought it was justified, and some people probably still do.
Well, so that's pretty sad.
Donald Sterling among them.
Yeah, well, see, the difference is that, I mean, I had tried to get a foundation going for people like Sarah in Birmingham, because with the 50th anniversary of 63 having just recently passed.
September.
2013. I had thought that since the money was going to be spent, the city was going to be spending a lot of money on this celebration, this commemoration anyway, that some of that money ought to go to the people who paid the highest price, like Sarah Collins Rudolph. And there was a lot of receptivity for it in the business community. I presented this to the Rotary Club in Birmingham, and it just kind of nobody could ever make it happen. And yet, when you contrast that to the victims of 9/11 or the Marathon bombing, there was total consensus that that they should not have to suffer silently or without some kind of compensation for that.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and there was none of that in Birmingham. And the difference was, the similarities that I see is that what average white people now in this country since 9/11 understand is what it's like to be potentially a victim of terrorism. And that's what blacks in the South experience every day of their lives.
All right. Diane McWhorter, Sandra Jaffe, thanks so much.